Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, friends. Welcome to another episode of the Marketing Your Practice podcast. Today, we're going to be talking all about branding. Now, branding is one of those things that I see more confusion and more mistakes made than many marketing issues as well. When I'm talking to most practitioners about branding, we tend to think about logos, maybe about colors, what kind of text and font the signs in around our practice. Now, many people think that that's what marketing is. It's all about getting my business card right and getting my logo and my name out there. And while that's part of it, branding is a lot more than that. Branding is actually everything that you do. You are your brand. We'll talk about that a lot going forward as well. What I want to share with you today is one of my favorite books on branding. It's a book called Primal Branding by Primal Branding. The subtitle is Create Belief Systems That Attract Communities. So it really makes sense for us, particularly as heart-centered, natural health and wellness experts who are really committed to having more impact and influence in our community as well. Here's what Patrick says. He says, brands are belief systems. What we call primal branding is the ability to make people feel better about your brand than another. We want people choosing us as opposed to the practitioner down the road, or choosing us as opposed to no one. So this means that we need to build relationships, and we need to make sure that we're aligning as far as belief systems go as well. Patrick goes on to talk about that there are 7 brand messages, okay? Now we need to be consciously creating these 7 brand messages. I'm going to share them all throughout this podcast episode today as well. That when we do this, this is what leads to that preferential brand appeal. So a great book. I'm going to summarize it for you today because it's kind of it's not a long book, but it's longer than what it ought to be, because you'll see in the next 20 minutes, I'll give you the high points in terms of what's going on. So we'll review in this episode today the 7 primal branding codes that help you to build a community full of believers. We're going to have a look at some implementation strategies for each and every one of those primal branding codes as well. All right, let's jump ourselves into this right now. The first primal branding code, man, I'm going to have a hard time saying that today, is what Hanlon refers to as the creation story. And this is really important. And if you think about any of the brands that you have a really strong affinity with, any of the celebrities maybe that you have a really strong affinity with, whether they be actors, singers, you name it from there too. What we tend to know is we know their backstory. We know, for instance, Oprah Winfrey, the struggles that she had growing up. You know, our favorite celebs, we know where they grew up, all about it. So in fact, Hanlon says this as well. He says, where you come from is as important for people to know as what you believe and what your advantages are. Now, sometimes the difficulty when I'm coaching people on this, there's a real hesitancy to share the story behind why is it that I do what I do. You know, I'm a huge Tony Robbins fan. I've done lots of work with Tony, and regardless of which of his programs I'm doing, whether they're the kind of introductory ones or whether they're ones that there's a significant investment in, he always tells his story, his creation story, you know, right the way through his mum, stepmom, dad, to growing up and literally washing his dishes in the sink, in the bathtub rather as well. This same story he says again and again. Now, this is important because it helps to create connection. When we know the background story through there, it provides meaning to your brand. Now, what this often looks like for us is, imagine that you're out at a party and you're meeting a new person. Invariably, the conversation often goes towards, hey, where did you grow up? You know, what's your background? What did you used to do? And when we can find out a bit of their background story, like, you know, I grew up down in country Victoria, you know, I came up to Melbourne, there's that connection that's allowed to happen. The kind of creation story that we want to be sharing is not just that, but why did you choose to become a chiropractor, a naturopath, or why did you choose to practice in the town that you're practicing now? If you have listened to some of the earlier stories or episodes that I did with Dennis Yu, he talks about this being an important why story. Like, why do you do what you do? And this is really easy to share, and it could be one of those videos that you share. A couple of episodes ago, I talked about videos that you should be making for each of your patients. The creation story is one of those. Let me tell you why I chose to become a chiropractor and why I'm so damn passionate about it. Let me tell you why you're going to see lots of kids in the practice there as well, and why there's lots of healthy people coming to see me. And then you share your story. This really starts to help us build relationship. This really starts to help us kind of connect with people as well. So in terms of some implementation strategies with regards to this, start sharing who you are. Like, who are you behind just being a chiropractor and naturopath? Where did you come from? What was your journey to where you are today? And why do you do what you do? And ultimately what you want to have with this is multiple different versions. So there should be a 30-second version, there should be a 2-minute version, and maybe there's a 10 or 20-minute version where you go into a lot more depth. Now this story might vary depending on who you're talking to as well. If I was talking to a group of parents about why chiropractic might be a good thing for their kids, there might be a different part of my creation story that I might share if I was talking to elite athletes. Now, what I'm not saying here is that you make stuff up, because making stuff up is never cool and you'll get caught out, and that basically sucks. But we are telling a story, so it does give us a little bit of license for us to focus on different areas. So, in summary, part of Primal Branding is sharing with your community your creation story. Why did you choose to become a chiropractor and naturopath? What is your background story? Start to share little bits and pieces of that more often as you're moving forwards. The second Primal Branding creed that Hanlon talks about, Primal Branding code, again, man, I've got the mumbles today, is what he refers to as the creed. Hanlon explains it like this: the creed is what you want people to believe. So what is it? Think about the very best patients that you have, the lifers, the one you love looking after, who are a pleasure to look after. What is it that they understand that the people that perhaps don't kind of get what you do, that they don't understand? Now, when I think about this as a chiropractor, the kind of things that I want my patients understanding is that the body is self-healing. It's a really important thing for them to understand if they're going to get the concept of long-term chiropractic care. The second thing that I want them understanding is that the nerve system is the master system, that there are lots of important systems in the body, the cardiovascular system, the immune system, but the job of the nervous system is to control and coordinate all of that as well. And then the third thing I want them to understand is that when your spine gets stressed, your nerve system gets stressed. So that's really part of my creed. Those three things I'm repeating to my patients in multiple different forms. I'm saying them backwards and forwards, and sometimes just the middle one, but I'm wanting my patients to understand that as well. If you're a dentist, what do they need to understand? And maybe it is that a healthy teeth is not just about a healthy smile, it's much more than that. Or maybe that a healthy smile makes you better than just, has an impact on all levels of your health, not just cosmetically, but when we feel good about our smile and our teeth, it helps our confidence, which therefore has an impact on our relationships, which therefore has an impact on us at work. You kind of name it from there too. But what is the creed that if you could, wave a magic wand, sprinkle pixie dust over your community, that if they understood this, that it would create an even stronger relationship as well? So with regards to creed, here's some implementation thoughts. Repetition is the key here. This is something that we need to be saying again and again. And sometimes that holds us back because we feel like, hey man, I told my patients once, body's self-healing, nervous system's master system. When your spine is stressed, nervous system stressed, so therefore life isn't as good as what it ought to be. This is something that you need to be saying again and again and again as well. So, maybe it's bigger than that. Maybe your creed is that, healthy people create healthy planets. Or maybe your creed that you want to repeat all the time is that, health comes from good choices, not from good luck. These are the kind of things that when you're wanting to create a tribe of people, this is what we're wanting to do. This is not just, remember again, we're not just talking branding in terms of logo. Branding is a belief system that we want to create in our community. And if we want raving fans, if we want people that will march together and create the kind of practice, community and tribe there as well, then we have to have a creed. This is one of the things that kind of sits behind lots of, big, wonderful brands. The third is icons. This is really the visual representation of your brand. When most people are thinking about branding, then the icons is what they tend to think about, okay? So it is the colors, the logo. Now, often I see practitioners really skimp out on this. If I'm looking at their Instagram feed, if I'm looking at their website, there's no consistency there. So icons consistency is really important. So one of the things that you should have is that you really should have a brand map, that whenever you're putting out a newsletter, whenever you're having a little poster done, whenever you're emailing, that there's always the same font, there's always the same colors. There's a feel that runs through it. Now that consistency there is really important. If Nike, for instance, had different colored kind of logos, different catchphrases all the time. The logo changed. Sometimes it was there, sometimes it's not. It just doesn't look super professional. And that consistency and or on the other side of it, that lack of professionalism really costs our brand as well. Now, icons can be other things also. Maybe there's something really distinctive about you. Maybe you, for a little while, I had a mustache. I was going to say a really cool mustache, but that would be going too far. But maybe you've got dreadlocks. Maybe you like to wear hats all the time. You know, my good friend Russ Rosen always used to practice in Hawaiian kind of aloha shirts and bare feet. That was part of his branding. That was part of his icons there as well. So it doesn't just finish with regards to logos and bits and pieces to think about there also. So what you should be doing, if you haven't already, is going out and getting some cleanup and some work done in terms of creating those kind of brands. What are the colors that you use? What fonts are you going to use? What typography are you going to be using? So you can start to get some consistency across that. A graphic designer will help you with that really easily. And or you could just head over to a site like Canva and they will help you choose colors and what colors match together, what fonts go together as well, and then just stick with that, okay? Have that as a brand identity moving forwards. So again, implementation to sum it all up, consistency is the key. Don't overcomplicate things. Spend the time and money to clarify a practice style guide. That's the fancy name for what it's called. I love Canva when it comes to those kind of things. But well, are there other things that you could have consistency with as well? Hats, glasses, backgrounds, you know, part of this kind of dribbles into other areas there as well. But there's a consistency in terms of where I shoot the podcasts. If you happen to be watching the visual version of this, if it pops up in your news feed there too, there's a sense of familiarity that you will see when you're looking at that too. That's part of the icons as well. Rituals are another thing. Brands have rituals. You know, when we go into McDonald's and then we put our order in, part of that ritual is, would you like fries with that? We expect that to happen. You know, there's a ritual that goes along when you're ordering in at Starbucks, at many of these kind of brands that have a real affinity across the globe, they have rituals. So rituals are the repeated interactions that people have with your enterprise, okay? So I have taken a real time and effort to think about these with regards to my patients as well. You know, there's a bit of a ritual about how we go with our adjustments. You know, I have people lying down on the table, relaxing beforehand, taking some nice deep breaths. Usually one of the first things I will check in with them and say, is there anything new or different going on? You know, we check in with what's going on. And I often, more times than not, finish the adjustment with, that was a beautiful adjustment, powers on, have a great day. That repeated and that repetition there as well starts to build a ritual in there. It actually adds value to the adjustment. Now, the ritual doesn't finish for me just with regards to when their adjustment finishes. We talk about after the adjustment as well. There's two really important rituals, and that is a walk and water. So we have beautiful filtered water up at the front desk. We encourage our patients to fill their water bottles, get a cup of water there too, and go for a walk around the block. These rituals extend the length of the adjustment there as well. So there's a preparation time before their adjustment, and then after the adjustment, there's their walk and water that they do. So when you're thinking about these things, what can you ritualize inside your practice? What can you create that consistent experience around? So what repeated interactions can you ritualize? You know, what could your patients grow to love and expect from you? So as I mentioned before, for me, in terms of walk and water, finish with adjustment with powers on. You know, is there a good way for you to open and close your adjustments? You know, I have a ritual with regards to how I start off this podcast each and every time. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, folks. Welcome. So it's that same kind of repetition that we love there as well. And you should be putting these kind of rituals inside your practice as well. The fifth brand creed is a concept of what Hanlon refers to as sacred words. Now, these sacred words set people apart set the people that are inside your group apart from the people that are outside of your group. So it starts to bring people together. So it helps to distinguish us. For instance, when we think about maybe Starbucks, you know, if you're a Starbucks person, you would understand language like an iced grande skinny decaf latte. You know, that's how we know that we're part of the in tribe versus the outside tribe. You know, you might go into a fancy coffee shop and maybe you might ask for a piccolo or a magic or something like that. These are things that I learned from my coffee loving friend, Martin Harvey. But sacred words are really important too, to have somebody feel like you're wrapping your arms around them and they're on the inside. It's a secret language. It's a secret handshake that happens as well. Now, we have to be careful with this too, because we want to make sure sometimes when I see practitioners implementing sacred words, sometimes we can confuse. And remember, when we confuse, we lose. So we implement and we start to instigate words like subluxation, and I think that's a great word for you to have as a part of your language there as well. Adjustment versus manipulation. But sometimes we can get too deep. We're talking about kind of sympathetic stress, and we're talking about anterior temporal lobes of the brain, all those kind of things there. But maybe for you, it's just making sure that your audience understands, gluten-free, and they understand essential fatty acids. What are the words that you could have them using and being a part of the inner tribe from there too? This is one in particular that I'm always a little bit hesitancy about, because I am a big fan, as I said before, of when you confuse, you lose. I learned that from Donald Miller in his book, Building a Story Brand as well. But what are some words that you could start to have that would separate those on the inside from those from the outside? The sixth branding code is what Hanlon refers to as the non-believers. Part of saying who you are and what you stand for is also about declaring who you're not. Now, sometimes when I will read this from different authors in around marketing, they will talk about, really wanting to put a line in the sand and say, look, I do this, and if you're one of those people there, I really want to polarize. Now, polarizing an audience is one way to get a lot of attention. But often in the process of polarizing, there can be a fair bit of pretty nasty energy that goes along with it as well. When you think about the debate that we see with different kind of parties over in America, you just had an election recently between the Republicans and the Democrats, between the pro-gun and the anti-gun, between the pro-life and, the freedom of choice. These are extreme examples of, identifying the non-believers. And I don't think we need to go that far. If you're thinking about an example of how you might want to implement this into your practice, the group that I think that it's done it great is Apple, when we compare the Mac versus PC. I'm super passionate about being a Mac user, but I ain't going to go on a rally. I'm not going to fight a PC user. I'm not going to want to call them names. Certainly I'm not going to go to war. It's a peaceful kind of declaration of what I stand for versus them. And it's the same kind of thing that, I want to create inside my chiropractic practice. That, hey man, we're for people who want to, manage their health. They want to eat well. They want to exercise. They believe that the body is self-healing. They're not just after a quick fix. They're wanting to live life to their fullest. So sometimes in us communicating what we're for, we're also communicating what we're against. So again, with this one here, if you're going to really call out the non-believers, it can be a super effective strategy, but expect that you might get a bit of angst and tension with it as well. If you're looking for an avenue to model with regards to this, think about the difference between the Mac versus PC user as well. So, implementation, things for you to think about. Share with your patients and your community what you stand for. So as I mentioned before, for me, I'm not a quick fix doctor. If you're wanting someone to just kind of patch you up, I'm not your doc. I'm not one of those spine cracking chiropractors. These are the kind of things that I will say often in my videos, when I'm meeting people in person, those kind of things there to differentiate in terms of who I am and who I am not. The seventh and final primal branding code that Hanlon talks about is all about that primal brands have a leader. Now, this is easy for us because we're small brands, small businesses as a general rule. So we tend to be, the face of our business. But we're seeing this more happening with big businesses as well. We think about Tesla, and at the top of Tesla, we have Elon Musk. When we think about Amazon, then on top of Amazon, we have Jeff Bezos as well. That took me a moment to kind of think about that as well. But now what we're starting to see is these growing brands, they actually have a leader. If we go back 2 or 3 decades ago, lots of the biggest brands, we didn't necessarily know who ran them. Like maybe I can ask you now, who is it that runs Nike? Who is it that is at the head of, General Motors? Back in the old days, I think it was Lee Iacocca. I think you get what I'm saying, is that this is important for us to be present. Sometimes I'll talk with practitioners and they'll say, I want to be making some videos, but I don't want to be in them. I'm like, it's not going to work. You need to be visible as well. Hanlon goes on to say that all successful belief systems have a person who is the catalyst, the risk taker, the visionary, the iconoclast. This is it. If I think with this too, I'm not going to try and convince you on this. If you're not somebody that wants to have more impact and influence in their community, I'm all for you having great practice growth and income as well. But if it's just that you want, then maybe this is not for you. But if you're wanting to move and really be a thought leader in your community as well, then that means that you need to be a leader. Now, part of this to think about though is this as well, is if you have multiple practitioners inside your practice, it's important that you're all present. So, don't just, so if I've had associates that work with me, we make sure that they're in the videos, they're a part of it as well. You might have the person as the principal or the owner of the practice, but we can't ignore the other people. In fact, one of the things that you could and should be doing, and part of your marketing, is sharing your staff, letting people see behind the curtains of who your staff are, what do they do on the weekend, what are their hobbies. You will find those types of videos get loads of engagement, but this is, we're starting to elevate them as well. So the leader is really important, that you need to be present, and it's totally okay and probably a good advice to have multiple leaders, particularly if you have multiple practitioners in and across your practice as well. So those are the 7 primal branding codes as well. I'm going to just quickly summarize all of those for you as well. If you've really loved this and you want to dive even deeper, then you should get Hanlon's book. It's called the Primal Branding Code as well. Primal Branding is what it's called. It's a great book, but I think I've done a pretty good job of just summarizing for you too. So the first one is this: creation story. Start sharing more with your patients when you're in person, in your videos, in your marketing, about why you choose to be who you are. What was the background story that got you to where you are? Number 2 is the creed, okay? The creed is what you want people to believe. I talked about in my situation, I want them to believe that the body is self-healing, that the nervous system is the master system, and that when your spine becomes stressed, your nerve system becomes stressed as well. The 3rd primal branding code is icons. Now, what I want you to do from here is make sure that you get some consistency with things. Spend the time, effort, energy, money to put together practice style guides so there are consistent colors, consistent text that you use as well, that you're not getting all higgledy-piggledy with regards to that. Canva, C-A-N-V-A, is a great spot that you can put all that together for free if you're prepared to invest 30 to 60 minutes. Number 4 is the rituals. What are the repeated things? What can you ritualize? How people come into your office, how they're greeted, how they're bid farewell to. Can you ritualize the way that you start and finish your adjustments as well? What are the sacred words? Again, what are the words that you want people to understand? Is it things like subluxation, the difference between an adjustment and a manipulation? These are good things and words that we want our people to understand as well. The non-pagans, identifying those on the inside versus those on the outside. This is about, to some extent, creating some polarity. I've said to you guys beforehand, and it was Bill Esteb it was, who introduced me to the concept of magnetism. And he said, the more magnetic you are, when you flip that magnet around, the more repulsive you are as well. So don't expect to always only have all the people love you. Not possible. I think if all the people in the world don't love Beyonce, then what chance do I have? Beyonce is clearly amazing, and yet some people don't like her as well, okay? And the final is the leader. We need to be present. We need to be a part of our brand if we're going to really create a community of believers in and around us. Start to implement all of those. Just some thoughts to finish with there as well. There might be, trying to implement all 7 of those all at once might be overwhelming for you. Where do you start? What's the easiest one for you to begin with? Is it just putting together, your colors and your logo and those kind of things there? Is it telling more stories? Is it showing more often? What can you ritualize as well? Pick one of those or 2 of those to get started with and get to work. Gang, as always, again, today, I'm feeling super lovey here today. I really do love you all. Have a great day. Keep doing what you're doing. Remember, your community needs you. I appreciate that you're out there saving lives each and every day. I think us as natural health practitioners are some of the most undervalued, underappreciated people in our community. It's not easy doing what we do as well, and I appreciate all the effort and energy that you put into that as well. Till next time, see you soon. Bye. If you enjoyed listening to this podcast, you have to come and check out the Community Influencer Program. It's my monthly coaching program where we take all this material and I'll work one-on-one with you to apply, implement, systematize, and help guide you and your practice to the next level. Now you can join me on over at adiomedia.com/join. That's adiomedia.com/join. I'd love to see you in there.